All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be with you for the free-for-all, and I'm doing it a day early this week as I will be off tomorrow. No Halitics. So if you want to talk to me, this is your last day of the week, and I certainly hope you will take advantage of this opportunity, which I believe, among just about any, well, there are other shows. I've seen a few others where people take calls, but I'm one of the only ones, and people, even when I call it a live stream, people are like, isn't it just a podcast? What's the difference between this and a live podcast and a live stream? My answer is I take calls. I speak to you. That's why I call it live, because it's actually a live dialogue. Taking tomorrow off, I mentioned this, looking forward to a reunion up in New York City with some great college friends. It'll be a bit bittersweet. One of our closest buddies who really brought a lot of us together died earlier this year. And so it's going to be bittersweet. We'll talk about him. And certainly I miss my close friend who died at a very young age, younger than I am. And he was younger than I was always. So it's hard. It's like losing a little brother, to be perfectly honest with you. I haven't had that experience of losing a sibling, but I imagine it's it's extraordinarily painful. I have friends who have, and it's horrible for them. Losing my friend's close, very close. He was a dear friend for many years, and a close family friend. We'll remember him. I was active this morning. There's a picture at a protest rally against the woman in the middle. You may or may not recognize her. I most certainly would not have, but for the fact that I was there. That's Shelley Moore Capito. She is one of the two U.S. senators from the mountaineer state, West Virginia. And we were there protesting her staunch support along with her compatriot from West Virginia. He's a Democrat, of course, Joe Manchin, Democrat name only perhaps. She's a Republican, Shelley Moore Capito. She and Manchin worked closely across the aisle to jam that Mountain Valley Pipeline through, despite very, very strong opposition from within her state, from around the region, and also from the Democratic Party, which simply would not approve the pipeline. So how did it get through? With a Democratic president? Well, Joe Biden pushed it through in his dirty debt ceiling relief bill earlier this fall in September, and it was just an absolute shame for him to do that. He really, I think, hurt himself badly in terms of the upcoming election. He will lose a lot of young votes because of that, as well as his pushing aggressively for the Willow Creek carbon bomb on the shores of the Arctic Ocean. The last thing we need is more drilling, more extraction, more fossil fuels. Shelley Moore Capito all in, of course, for that Mountain Valley Pipeline. So we interrupted an event she was holding down on Capitol Hill. It was actually sponsored by, big surprise, Big Pharma, a company called Emergent, which is poised to make millions, perhaps even billions, from the fentanyl crisis, the opiate addiction crisis. And they sponsored this event, hoping, of course, and I think expecting full well, that Senator Capito will be pushing through, sponsoring perhaps bipartisan legislation to pour millions of dollars of your tax dollars into the company Emergent to help, presumably, purportedly, folks get, ostensibly to help folks get off an addiction to opioids like fentanyl. But of course, that crisis itself was largely created by the obscene intermarriage of Big Pharma and the federal government, with the Sackler family using its connections to push the use of fentanyl, which is a highly addictive painkiller in many cases where it was not even called for. And this was a major driver. Another driver, of course, is just the sadness, the ugliness of life in much of America. And folks in West Virginia, a beautiful area in terms of the visual in terms, it's still, you have mountains now that have the tops lopped off them. They're just sort of flat mesa looking things, lots of vegetation that's been ripped up by the roots in areas where the pipelines go through, terrible flooding resulting from mine explosions and the like. But all that said, there are many beautiful areas, of course, in West Virginia as well. And the Manchin-Capito Biden pipeline will ruin even more of that once beautiful state. And now still beautiful in many places, but not as beautiful as it once was. And of course, again, that ugliness does contribute to the fentanyl crisis. If you live in a hellscape, if your only job options are dead end or going down in the mine, then who can be surprised if you turn to painkillers? So we were there protesting against this event, and it went over. There was a lot of there I am. If you were wondering if I was there or if I'm in the picture, you can see me holding up the sign to the left on your of the picture on your screen. So there I am in my jacket, which I'm wearing today. I'm actually dressed up. I dressed up for today's call. And it was actually very, I was not really psyched about going, to be perfectly honest. There was some fear there might be arrests. There were not. There were no police. There was one staffer or aide, perhaps it was Capito's aide, I don't know. He got very aggressive. He was pushing people around, trying to drag us off stage. And in the end, after a bit of back and forth with Capito, I don't have a good video of this, or I'd share it with you. I was actually taking images, and the videos I've seen were not real good. So they're not available. Maybe on Monday I'll have something better where you can actually see the back and forth with Senator Capito. But we were somewhat manhandled, and they tried to push us off. In the end, after a few minutes, Capito left, and I would say we were half the people at this event at a very small venue, the Hawk and Dove restaurant bar in Capitol Hill, which is really a very nice place, and it's actually a real historical landmark. I think it's well over 100 years old, dating back to the 19th century. 240-363-7190 if you want to talk to me about this event. Love to hear from you or anything else. It is the free-for-all, so this is your time to share with me your feelings. I have mentioned that I have had some questions, some trepidation about some of the climate defiant actions. I've gotten involved with this group because they're doing something. They're taking real action. They're actually interrupting Congress members. They're interrupting executive branch officials. They're doing everything they can to kind of throw a monkey wrench into the business as usual fossil fuels intermarriage with the federal government. And the reason I say an intermarriage is it should be an intermarriage because it should be between, again, corporations that are out there doing everything they possibly can to maximize their profits, come hell or high water, damn the expense, damn the costs to the American public, damn the costs to the world. And I say an intermarriage because they shouldn't be. There should be no connection to the federal government. They should be wholly separated. The federal government is supposed to be a completely different kind of entity. But this is really a devil's mixture with federal and state legislators so often taking bribes from the fossil fuel industry. I mentioned earlier, big pharma. It's incredibly sad. It's incredibly disheartening. And I note that Shelley Moore Capito, the senator we were protesting today, does take quite a large, contributions from fossil fuel corporations. And now she's, of course, supporting their rampage through, their pillaging through her state, and also from big pharma. Big surprise. She is a Republican. Usually we go after Democrats, or much of the time anyway, but this was an event targeting a Republican. One thing I was gratified by, no police. I had an eye out. If cops came, I was thinking, do I duck out the back door? What do I do? The last thing I wanted was to be arrested. There was a form we filled out beforehand to provide a contact in case we are arrested. And Climate Defiance does have an attorney on retainer, I believe, to help us out. But that is not what I want. I want arrested. Not before this program, or not, frankly, ever. Why do I care so much? And again, I'm on record of being somewhat critical. I didn't like it when Climate Defiance blocked the entry to the Burning Man event in the Nevada desert, I guess near the California line, but in Nevada. I wasn't happy about that. I thought they were perhaps alienating potential allies. And also, I don't think it was great for the environment to back up cars on their way into this event. I understand why they did it. The event itself is problematic, and you're doing harm to this desert environment, and also all the cars going there is obviously causing a problem. But I think on a balance, in my balancing test, I wouldn't have done it that way. There's no such balancing test that would militate against confronting a climate criminal like Shelley Moore Capito. This was the right call. I think it was meaningful. There was a lot of media there. I'm sure we'll get attention. So I was very pleased to be part of it, proud to be part of this. And if you ask me, well, why is this so important to you? I was thinking about it, and I mentioned it was, I don't know if I mentioned this. I had a real sense of sadness. Yes, we had solidarity. Yes, we were standing together. But there was real sadness too. And why is there sadness? Because it's such a no-brainer. Of course we shouldn't be building any more pipelines. Of course the Democratic Party should be lockstep against the continued extraction of natural gas, which is so harmful, so destructive to the environment, using fracking techniques, which gobbles up much of our remaining fresh, precious water. This is an easy one, and yet we're at each other's throats. We can't agree. Why not? Even on this program, I've had people say, well, we need a bridge fuel. The bridge fuel we've been bridging for 200-300 years. The way you move away from a fossil fuel is quite simple. You just stop using it. You make it prohibitively expensive. And yes, because of the pain that will otherwise cause poor, struggling working people, you make sure that they can afford and have available to them alternatives, which the market will do without any question. I showed this picture. I didn't get a great shot today of Capitol Hill. It's beautiful. You can see the blue skies through the trees. This is not a great picture. It's a very nice area, middle-class homes, some working-class families on the periphery of Capitol Hill. It is, to my way of thinking, one of the best urban environments you can live in. It has the best of the city. You have lots of arts, good restaurants, a great social life, and at the same time, there are trees, there are lawns. It's really a pleasant place to live. And it's unfortunately, for that reason, become very, very expensive. It wasn't always like that, but it is now. We have in our country still so much that's worth conserving, worth preserving, and there is enough for all of us. There isn't enough for all of us to live like kings. There isn't even enough for all of us to live like, I don't know, an upper middle class lifestyle. But there's enough for every one of us to have a nice home. There's enough for every one of us to have clean, green grass and yards and lawns and fields that are public, and parks, which they have in abundance on Capitol Hill. There's enough. But only if we share and only if we stop with this insane, world-destructive source of energy, fossil fuels. It's sad to me that the only avenue available to us appears to be confrontation, appears to be shutting it down. People like Shelley Moore Capito, Joe Manchin, Joe Biden are not amenable to reason. They cannot be persuaded. The Democratic Party will not change its pro-war position. It will not change its pro-corporate positions no matter what we do, short of either shutting it down or somehow gathering the political will to vote them out. And we have not been able to do that. We're no closer to doing that than we've ever been. It's so sad. And the price that we're paying and that our children and their children are going to pay is obviously, without any question, prohibitively expensive. That's why I do this. That's why I go to rallies like that. That's why I do this live stream. I hope you'll join me, 240-363-7190. Again, off tomorrow. It is Halitics. Click like, click subscribe in the bottom right of your screen. I do want to tell you we've got a great guest coming up after Thanksgiving. I'm very excited to announce that Juan, and now of course his last name has slipped my mind, but he is running for U.S. Senate in the state of Maryland, and I'm very, very excited to welcome him. He is a pro Medicare for All advocate, and we're really excited to have him on. And I'll give you more updates as we approach. But it's really, if you Google Juan candidate for U.S. Senate Maryland, you'll find him. He is not one of the men at the top, but he's close in terms of the potential for winning that election. He has it. We've got to unite again in support of progressive Democrats, or progressives. I shouldn't say Democrats at all. We must unite to support Democrats. And I'm getting a little bit of noise there. I apologize for that, folks. I'm not clear why there's so much loudness coming in. But we'll just go to John right away. I think it's John. Hey, John, how you doing? Caller, I've got you on the line from Salinas. Who am I talking to? Let me see. I got you muted. Here we go. Yes, you're on the air.
Yes,
go ahead. Oh, I'm going to have to mute them. We're getting a little feedback too, and I'm not sure where that's coming from, folks. I do apologize. So let me, well, we'll just have to proceed without that because I'm getting the bad noise from somewhere. I can't. Do I have another mic up? This is, frustrating because I've felt like I've got everything going so well lately without tech issues. And I've gotten mocked in the past for not, for having not done a real good job. And yet now I'm going to just shut this down so we don't hear that audio. Try to figure out where it's coming from. 240-36, well, don't call right now because I had to shut the line down. Again, it is very sad for me to feel as though we simply can't make progress. Why did Andy Beshear, and yet we should be able to, if you look at what happened in Kentucky, and again, we were confronting a pro-fossil fuels, candidate? What do you want to call her? A pro-fossil fuels U.S. senator from West Virginia, Appalachia. You can win in Appalachia if you're progressive. We see that in Kentucky. Andy Beshear got reelected, a Democrat, a couple days ago, Tuesday, and he ran on health care. He ran on a true progressive priority. Health care is a basic human right. Governor Beshear believes every Kentucky family deserves to see a doctor and receive treatment when they're sick. So you see that this can really work, right? You see that when Democrats campaign as progressives, they can win. So why aren't they? Well, a lot of times they're not, because they're the money, because they're bought off, because they're, part of the corporate establishment, and because they're getting, or they anticipate, huge golden parachutes when they leave office. It is. There's really no way to look at it except it's, we're losing. We're losing big. The people are losing big because of this. All right, if you want to, and I was going to say, if you want to join me, 240-363-7190, but again, I've turned off the phone for now because, and I can't quite figure out where that loudness was coming from. I've got everything, I believe, off, unless I've got I don't think I do, 2 dial pads. So Bashir made it clear, all right, Bashir made it clear that he was running to help the people of Kentucky. And he also presented some examples where he had delivered. So as we noted, he calls it a human right. Healthcare is a human right, a progressive talking point. Every Kentucky family deserves to see a doctor when they're sick. And he followed through on his promise to rescind the Medicaid waiver, which would have kicked nearly 100,000 Kentuckians off their coverage. So here, Bashir, he talked the talk. He promised before his first term in office, he was going to make sure that Kentuckians, poor and working class Kentuckians who were you could not afford Obamacare, but maybe were a little bit had too high an income to be eligible for traditional Medicaid. He said, I'm going to get you your health care. And he did. So this is a great accomplishment. And he talked it and he walked it and he won. So progressives can win in red states if they deliver for the constituents in their states. And that's exactly what Governor Bashir did. And more from his website, I think, really, again, showing how Democrats can win. Make life better for the people in your state. When Kentucky expanded Medicaid, it provided 400,000 more of our fellow Kentuckians access to affordable health care. After the expansion, they could go see a doctor without fear of bankruptcy, and the expansion ensured that nearly all Kentucky children had real access to health care. So this is a big deal. And I don't see how we can look at this without saying this is the roadmap that Democrats have to follow if they want to win in red states. It's not about triangulation. It's not about centrism. It's not about adopting some more conservative policies. It's about delivering for the people in your state and making their lives just a little bit better. That's what Governor Bashir has done. That's why he got reelected. Is he perfect? No. But better for sure than the Republican alternative and showing the path to winning in a red state. All right, I put the phone back on. If you want to try me one more time, we're going to go for it. 240-363-7190. What I actually did is just simply turn the volume way down because I think maybe the issue was I just had my volume up a little too high on my system here for you. That may have caused a little beeping sound if you heard it, which I most certainly, of course, did. So I'm just turning that down. All right, I had mentioned yesterday when we talked to Jack that I said, the war in Ukraine is lost. It's not going to, or to those who see it, who view victory as a Ukraine victory over Russia. That's not going to happen. And I got pushback. I think John's trying again. Let's see if we can get him on. John, do you catch me now, John? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Hello. Do I have you? And I hear someone talking, but I don't hear them. I only hear myself, and I don't know why I'm getting that feedback. That is very, very frustrating for me. I wonder. There shouldn't be. Whatever. It's coming right back at me. So we just can't. We just can't do that. There's some change in the system that I'm confused by. To be perfectly honest with you, can't figure out why I'm getting that feedback. Am I Let's forward 3. Let's find out. Sorry, folks. I know it's what Coach used to say. The rehearsal's going really well, so that's not. Unclear. Unclear what could be causing this. All right, 240-36. Well, I said that. I really want to talk to you, John. Are you there? Do I have you, John? Now I think he might be there, but I don't hear him. No, he's gone. I'm wondering whether someone was pushed. The only other possibility is someone, well, there shouldn't be feedback. The feedback maybe was on that line, is my last guess, my last best guess. I know this is the worst. People don't want to hear this nonsense at all, but I don't know what else to do because I want it to work and I want to talk to you. And that's like really important to me. And usually this does work. I think there may be a monitoring issue. I want to check one last time. Monitor off, monitor, and output. Let's try that. Works. Yeah, no, I'm still not getting my video, and it should be with the monitor on. Wonder if I should have just restarted everything. All right. So the war is going badly. There's no question about it. We're going to hear from some folks to tell us exactly why that's happening. Yeah. So now I am hearing my ring. So I believe if you call me now, I'm going to give you one more chance, or I'm going to give myself one more chance to take a caller. 240-363-7190. And again, as Coach says, the rehearsal is going really well. I wonder why I was getting the feedback, though, was so frustrating, and I can't figure that out. From last week, 2 articles published this week give stark assessment of Ukraine's prospects in war with Russia, and its war with Russia. One by the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army admits the battlefield has reached a stalemate and a long attritional war benefiting Moscow beckons. The other portrays President Zelensky as exhausted by the constant effort to cajole and persuade allies to keep the faith. And he said that. So the military chief, Valery Zaluzhny, says in a long essay and interview with The Economist that just like in the First World War, which by the way, we talk about stalemate, I've been talking about that on this program, we've reached the level of technology that puts us into a stalemate. He acknowledges there will most likely be no deep and beautiful breakthrough, but instead an equilibrium of devastating losses and destruction. So my question would be, and if you want to try to join me one more time, John, go for it. Is it worth it? Is it worth going through all this just to maybe teach Putin a lesson? Maybe, because if you view this war as a personal battle with Vladimir Putin, is it worth fighting it at this point? John, are you there? I see now again. You there, John?
I'm here. I
Awesome.
can hear you this time.
Now I got you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you this time. Yeah, I called you a few times and couldn't hear you.
I've been having a lot of struggles with the phone, and I'm not even sure why, but I have been. But now we've got you. Go ahead.
Yeah. I had wait, before I get anecdotal, you were talking about what can be done. Our politicians aren't going to do anything about like the climate catastrophe. And I was thinking, if on a local level, like around where I live, if they could get better bicycle infrastructure built, these e-bikes would really, I think a lot of people would make the shift to e-bikes just because fuel is so expensive already out here. This would be a great place to test your theory, Hal, because gas here is just already prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. And I have 2 cousins that live up in Portland. Both decided to do away with the car. Both got e-bikes. And they're happy they did it. They said in the rain they have to, wear gear and stuff like that, but they're happy they did it. No insurance. They hardly pay anything.
John, let me ask you a question, because I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What kind of infrastructure would you need for e-bikes? Are you saying there just isn't the ability to charge them? Because we have plenty of them in my area, and I thought people just bike home and then they plug them in. So can't they do that where you are?
So you can just plug them in. It's just a regular 110 outlet. The problem here, we have a good bike lane, but it goes just to the touristy area. It's right along the water. We have another one on Fremont Avenue. It can kind of get you from the Seaside Delray Oaks border down the road, maybe half a mile. That's basically all you get out of it. We need bike paths because even though they paint bike paths on the side of the road for people, it's not safe. I won't ride on those. There's too many people texting and driving and just not paying attention. I see it all the time.
So would you ride on would you ride, say, from Seaside into Pacific Grove on Lighthouse Avenue, or would you not do that?
From Seaside, I could do it because I would take the scenic route, the bike path, which is pretty safe.
But I'm saying on the road itself, because I used to bike on Lighthouse Avenue now and then. You wouldn't do that.
No way.
Okay.
No way.
Well, Fremont is worse. Fremont has worse traffic than Lighthouse.
Yeah, but Fremont has a bike path now in the middle.
Okay, that's good though.
It's got a one for each direction, actually. That's what I'm talking about, is more bicycle infrastructure. If they had maybe a bike path that went all the way from Salinas to the Monterey Peninsula. I'm
trying to remember if I ever biked to Salinas. I don't think I ever biked from the peninsula to Salinas. I don't know that there's any way to do it safely.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of people that commute to work on Highway 68. And because cars are becoming prohibitively expensive, it's expensive to live here, even in Salinas. There are going to be people who choose to, get an e-bike and ride the e-bike to work, even if it takes long. It might not even take that long because there's so much traffic in the morning and in the evenings. If you're on a bike path, it might be the same amount of commute time.
Yeah, that's true. And also you can avoid, because of the traffic, you can go 20 miles consistently per hour on one of those e-bikes. At first, as a longtime bicyclist, I have great contempt, or I have to stifle my contempt for those on those e-bikes. But that said, I haven't been riding very much, so I really have no business being contemptuous of others who are on a bike, regardless of whether it's powered solely by the human body or by something else. And two, or B, I don't like the thought I've always had with e-bikes as well. They are powered by electricity, so they're not really clean and green. But that's kind of BS, because they can be not perfectly clean and green, but nothing ever is. Even a bicycle requires a paved road generally, which does require the use of fossil fuels and asphalt and stuff to lay. So the electric bikes are very efficient. They use very little electricity, A, and B, you can generate the electricity from the roof of your house. You can generate the electricity in a wind-powered or solar-powered, utility utility generating plant. So it really can be the answer. I agree with you.
Yeah, and even if you don't have solar panels, you're more than likely, if you're plugging into the wall, you're getting power from natural gas, which is better than burning gasoline. There's pros and cons, John, because a lot of natural gas now is fracked, which means they use tons of gallons of fresh water. In fact, over the past 10 years, we've used as much fresh water as Texas uses in a year. That's a lot of water to get natural gas out, and we're running out of fresh water, as you know. So that's one issue. And the other is, maybe natural gas is better. It does, when you burn it, it burns more completely, sure. But there's a lot of methane also, which temporarily is very, very bad. There's a lot of methane given off in the production of natural gas. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and both the production and often natural gas contains methane.
Oh, that's interesting.
Look it up. I might have that wrong, but I don't think I do. I think a lot of the natural gas that's burned has methane in it. I could be wrong, though.
I'll look it up. Yeah, I get stuff wrong all the time.
Not much.
You know what I had to do? I had to stop listening to Tom Hartman because I think he gets a lot of stuff wrong. He states things very confidently, and then later you look into it, and it just he's not. I don't think he's all that accurate.
Yeah,
and I can. Well, I mean, I hate to say that, but
don't tell Arlen. Arlen's a huge fan of Hartman's. But you're right. He certainly sounds very authoritative when he speaks.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a few things. I won't even go into it, but there was a few things. I even one time I read one of his books and was talking about a lab experiment that could have gone awry, and so this is how he was presenting this issue: a lab experiment that could have gone awry and wiped out all vegetation on the face of the earth. And there was a guy who was I don't know what his profession was, but he was clearly like a botanical scientist and told me that I was full of it. And I said, "Oh no, this is straight out of one of Tom Hartman's books." And when I listed Tom Hartman's name on Twitter, it automatically tagged him. And then the guy was arguing, and then Tom Hartman jumped into the argument, and I'm reading it, and eventually Tom Hartman had to concede to this guy. That was just clearly hyperbole. That what he printed in his book was hype.
Wow.
So, then on a few occasions, I've stated things to people like about how much wheat comes out of Ukraine. It's really not. He had stated at some point in one of his shows that Ukraine was basically feeding Africa. It's not really the case. I think France and Russia are both. It's basically French and Russian wheat that's mostly feeding Africa, and Ukraine is able to sell some there too. But he gets so many things wrong. I just don't want to fill my head with that. You know what I mean?
Well, this is the thing. I try very hard to be corrected or to correct myself. If I get things wrong, we all do. Mm-hmm. I may not be as good at it as I like to think I am, but I'm willing to certainly be corrected. I think with Tom, it's hard to get him, and a lot of these hosts are very, very leery. First of all, a lot of times they're rightly leery, right? People may call up and present themselves as experts, and they're not. So the host doesn't want to say I was wrong, and then it turns out they're not. So that's part of it. But they also will lose listeners. I mean, it's a sad part of this medium, but being strong and wrong is very appealing to a lot of people. And I find that one of the less attractive aspects of broadcasting.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I just, the other thing, the thing you got going for you is you can talk to people from either side, treat them with respect. And I'm noticing that a lot of these afternoon talk show hosts get very short with their callers. Tom Hartman does it. Randy Rhoads does it. I even heard Nicole Sandler do it. And
Sandler does that too. Well, this is part of the other reason. Yeah. I mean, I'll give a couple of reasons for that, in my opinion, John. And then I want your last thoughts if you want to talk about Ukraine briefly. A couple of reasons. One, I hate to admit this, but those hosts got more callers than I do. If I had 5 or 6 people calling at a time, I would give you less time. I'd still try to be polite, but I wouldn't give you as much time. So that may be part of the reason you hear the curtness from some of them. I think the other reason is, and this will be more flattering to myself, I mean, I think that they're very narcissistic people. You have to think you're great. You have to think you're special, that, people are going to want to watch you or listen to what you have to say. They don't take kindly to people who challenge them. It's a blow to their ego, and they're aggressive, and they aggressively push back. I think that's the less attractive reason for that.
Okay, so I think that what kind of blows that theory up is that Norman Goldman and Ed Schultz used to both treat all of their callers with respect, even if they thought that they were trolls calling up, trying to plant seeds of doubt and like pay people who are paid advocates for the other side calling up and shilling on the air. They would express a little bit of skepticism.
Ed, though, Big Eddie did throw an F-bomb at Drew from Monterey. Do you remember Drew used to call my show? Drew, if you find me, call me, please. I'd love to talk to you. But Big Eddie threw an F-bomb at Drew, and he went off the air. Ed did several months later. Drew used to push his buttons, and so I do remember that. But I agree with you. Ed really tried hard to keep himself under control. And Norman Goldman is good that way too. But again, I don't think that blows my theory completely out of the water. I mean, they could be, again, you have to think highly of yourself to be doing this. But that said, they weren't as egotistical. They weren't as self-confident or arrogant, maybe is a better word, as some of these other hosts are.
It was nicer calling into their show because you could get into an argument with them, and it was easier to concede to them because they weren't jerks. If they were right, they were right. And you would say, yeah, well, I guess, just like with you, if I feel like I'm wrong, if we're having a discussion and I feel that I'm wrong, I can concede that, but I would have a hard time doing it to Hartman. Hartman just makes me want to choke him over the phone.
You want to dig in your heels. Exactly. All right. Quickly on Ukraine, and then I got to run. Got a few more stories I want to get to. Two more stories or part of the Ukraine. Oh, okay. I got a video. I got a couple of videos I want to play from Colonel Douglas McGregor, who's very, very critical of both our Ukraine and Israel policy. So I really want to get to that, and then also talk briefly about Congresswoman Tlaib. So go ahead, John, on Ukraine, if that's where you want to go.
On Ukraine, I follow it on Threads. There's a few different citizen reporters out there that have fairly good information, and I feel like. I just wanted to restate, when you said yesterday they were losing the war, I don't think by any measure they're losing the war. They've gained a lot of ground back. The type of war that they're fighting is essentially, it's not trench warfare because they have a lot of modernized artillery. But the front lines is very much like that. Getting back, 50 or 100 meters is costly. And especially doing it without getting your infantry slaughtered. So it's slow going, and they're going to be there a long time, but their heart is in it. They want to do this. They don't feel like they're being pressured by Europe or the United States.
All right, that's interesting. I'll be playing the video from Colonel McGregor, who is a very controversial figure, a lightning rod. He's an American retired colonel. And I'll play it. He presents a different viewpoint than you do. He does not set forth a description of a Ukrainian citizenry that is behind this war, or even a Ukrainian military. From his description, they want to get out. They want to end it. They want this to end. So I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying that he would say you're wrong. I'm not there. I don't know. Cost? I think the cost is too great. I would say the cost is too great, and I think there's a better. And I also don't think that we're fighting for freedom there, and I don't think they're going to be free. I think the way you get to be free is you have peace, and you have a ceasefire, and you talk to Russia, and you work something out. I just think that's the solution. I don't think they're free right now, getting bombed. John, thanks for the call. I'm so glad you kept trying, and I'm sorry we had the tech issues. Getting you on, but I'm glad I was able to do that. You have a great day, and great there. He drops off. So let's get right to it. So here, as you can see, Zaluzhny, the general there, says this is it's a stalemate. No, it's not exactly trench warfare, but in a lot of ways, it's like what happened in World War I with the long minefields. You see the old movies where the infantry soldiers with their guns and bayonets are trying to negotiate a landmine-filled rubble field that's full of rubble from, constant shells, mortars, and the like. So here is Colonel McGregor, who, full disclosure, I know some folks may not, this may turn you against him, as he was tapped at one point by Trump to be part of Trump's administration. He did not join it. I'm not sure whether that was his decision or it was that I believe other members of the Trump team didn't like McGregor. And you may say, well, that's why he's against Ukraine, because, Trump and the Republicans don't like Ukraine. But if you hear what he has to say about Palestine, and I will play it, Israel-Palestine as well, you'll see that this is a guy who is not towing any partisan line, but is presenting the truth as he sees it, whether it's true or not. Only time will tell, and only many experts' voices in unison could tell us. But here's Colonel McGregor.
We think that 50% of Ukraine's population has fled the country, is under Russian control now, or dead. People tell me that 500,000 Ukrainians have died. Now, during World War I, and we fought for 110 days during World War I, we sustained 318,000 casualties, and 110,000 Americans were killed. Literally, 1,000 died for every day that we fought in France. That's stunning, isn't it? Well, run the numbers. How long has Ukraine been at war with Russia? Started in February. We're still short of the 2-year mark. So if we say, what is it, 21 months or 20 months of warfare, 500,000 Ukrainians are dead. We're talking Ukrainian soldiers. So I'm not talking about civilians. And perhaps that many or more wounded, horribly wounded. We're talking about an army that is falling apart, where if you want to be evacuated by an ambulance to a reputable hospital, you have to bribe the ambulance driver and the people on the ambulance to take you there from the battlefield. You have soldiers that are kept in small groups of no more than 3 or 4 together and then sent in as replacements because they're afraid if they try to replace platoons and companies, they'll end up with a rebellion against the Ukrainian government.
All right, so I wanted to stop that part right there. So that's where what I was thinking when John was saying that the Ukraine people are behind the war is that McGregor saying, and he has sources, he talks a lot about his Russian sources. I presume he has Ukraine sources as well, sources in Ukraine. Again, I'm not saying that his view is the be-all and end-all, but he was retired. He was in the U.S. military. He was in intelligence. He is a retired colonel. He does have some authority. And he's saying that the Ukraine military is on the brink of collapse, and that so is the civilian government.
This war is over, but we won't let it die because the regime in Washington wants to maintain the fiction that there is something good happening in Kiev. There isn't. There's nothing there but corruption and criminality.
Yeah, so he says that corruption and criminality in Kiev, and he says this war is continuing because of the U.S. promoting it and obviously promoting Zelensky. And that kind of goes along with what Zaluzhny said to a degree. Zaluzhny was a little, less, I guess, cynical. He said if the U.S. or if the West provides higher tech weaponry or more soldiers, then maybe we can breach the Russian lines. But until or unless that happens, we will not win this war. It's just going to be a stalemate. It's going to be ever mounting casualties. The number of those in Ukraine, according to Colonel McGregor, over at this point 500,000, including that's the soldiers, and then the country itself, he says, has been depopulated largely by both people fleeing refugees as well as deaths and as well as the capture of territories by Russia. So to me, this is wrong. I mean, we need to be pushing for peace right now. Stop it. And I didn't play the part from McGregor where he talks about Putin, but he says Putin would like peace. Putin doesn't want this to go on forever. Putin would support a ceasefire. I can't understand why we're not. There's nothing there that persuades me that I've heard that this is anything but an absolute and utter disaster. All right. More from McGregor. This is from that same interview with Stephen Gardner. This interview got a lot of attention online. You should be able to find it if you want to hear all of it, see all of it. I'm just choosing, obviously cherry picking what supports my worldview, but my opinions. But in fact, pretty much all of it does. So I'm not going to go overboard and play the entire interview. That's not really fair. If you want to see it, you can do that, and I don't think it's a bad idea. All right, so more from McGregor, but this is really just to say, again, I think he seems like an honest broker in the sense that he's not acting as a flack for either political party. His criticism of the current policy, while you might say with respect to Ukraine, you might say that's kind of a Republican talking point. The Republicans are all in for Israel, so let's hear what he has to say. If he's a Republican ally, if what he has to say is somehow informed by support for Republicans, then you'd expect him to be all in for Israel. Let's hear what he has to say.
And I would not confuse the rage at what the Israelis are doing in Gaza with anti-Semitism. It's in the interest of Israelis to brand everything as anti-Semitism, but there are many places in the world where Jews are completely safe, and I would include most of Central Asia in that category.
Right. So what McGregor's talking about there, what started this conversation was the attack or the reported attack in, I believe, Moscow on Jews by Muslims or pro-Arab, pro-Palestine Russians on Jews. And he's saying it didn't happen. He's saying there just simply wasn't any kind of anti-Semitic attack, period, on them. He said, moreover, we have to be very careful to separate out pro-Palestinian rallies, pro-Palestinian marches, pro-Palestinian sentiment from anti-Semitism, with which I agree 1,000%. I'm Jewish. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not a Jew hater. I don't blame Jews for all the ills of the world. But I am very critical of Israel. And this is what McGregor is saying. He's saying there's so much anger throughout the Muslim world at Israel. It's not against Jews per se. And I'll play a little more of it, but he is being real clear to distinguish anti-Israel sentiment, pro-Palestine sentiment from anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. Why is that important? Because I think it shows him to be an honest broker, someone who's speaking their truth. Now, there is such a thing, in my opinion, not completely, but there is such a thing as objectivity and objective truth. Some things are true, some things are false. Not everything is easily characterized as true or false. There is such a thing even as the fog of war. People may act in a way that in retrospect looks horrible and atrocious, but maybe in that moment we can understand why it happened without condemning them 100%. McGregor is putting paid to the argument, which you hear so much on the right, which the Israeli lobby completely promotes, that if you criticize Israel, if you take on Israel, if you say Israel's wrong, you're a Jew hater. And McGregor's saying, no, false. The Arab world, the Muslim world, is outraged at what it's seeing Israel do to Palestine. But that doesn't mean they hate Jews. Now, they may start to hate Jews. I can see that happening. But he's saying that doesn't mean they hate Jews.
To Jews, but there are lots of objections to things the Israelis do. So that's another distinction that we don't bother to make in the press. And
all right. So he's, again, I think this guy seems certainly sincere. He is as much of an expert, I think, as anybody, more so than most. So I take what he has to say very seriously, especially when it confirms largely what General Zaluzhny from the Ukraine army said, which is this is a stalemate. It is not going well for us. The answer is we need to promote peace. All right, before I go, and if you call in right now, I'll give one more person a bite at the apple if they call in right now, because I'd love to talk to you before I go away for my weekend sojourn. 240-363-7190. Glad I got the phone issue resolved with John. I wasn't happy with that feedback. That was what really troubled me, was we were getting some feedback. So this story, again, very upsetting for me. As I mentioned, I was very upset. I'm very upset by, obviously, the climate catastrophe, the new Holocaust, our failure to address it, the fact that we need to confront our representatives in hopes that they'll give us a moment and listen to us when they're so completely, obviously in the pocket of for-profit multinational corporations who couldn't give a rat's fat ass about us, except to the extent that we might be customers of them or might work for them. And that's it. So it's very, very disheartening. It's not democracy. I don't think this is democracy either. I think it's very interesting. So the House voted to censure Representative Tlaib. I always say Tlaib. I keep hearing Tlaib. I guess I got to go listen to that over comments about Israel. I was really interested in this vote. By a 234-188 vote, relatively close, but clearly the sense of the House was against Tlaib. They passed the censure resolution. Now, it doesn't have a lot of meaning, although they could fine her, but it's not good. You don't want to be censured. And why? Because she used the phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Many want to believe that's some kind of a call for the elimination of the state of Israel. I don't buy that at all. Right now, Palestine is not free. Right now, the West Bank is not free. Right now, Gaza is not free. If you want freedom, then you need a one-state solution where everyone who lives in that region is a full citizen with full voting rights. I hear all the time from people, oh, this could never happen. They can't stand each other, the two groups. That's a load of crap. Of course it can happen. What do you mean it can't happen? As soon as you create the country, as soon as you guarantee everyone the political rights, and you insist, by the way, on some forms of economic security for everyone, they'll start to get along. They will. It'll happen. I firmly believe that. If you look in Germany today, the Jewish population is growing right now. Obviously, it's a fraction of what it was before the Holocaust. But many Jewish people are moving to Germany from Eastern Europe, especially because of the economic opportunities there. And it is a freer country for sure than the former Soviet Union, Russia is, and certainly it's more prosperous than Poland or Ukraine or some of the other countries in that area. So it's no surprise that Jewish people are moving to Germany. And yet this was a country with a 1,000-year history of Jew hatred, of pogrom after pogrom, that obviously culminated in perhaps, one of the worst mass murders in history. So, of course, if Jews and Germans can get along, then of course Jews and Palestinians can get along. They lived side by side for thousands of years. It's the current political situation that makes it such a hard sell. So yes, we do need a free Palestine as part of a free Israel, and that means everyone has equal political rights. To say from the mountains to the sea, Palestine will be free is not, in my view, it's just a simple call for justice. But the House claims not to have seen it that way, and by a 234-188 vote, voted in favor of censuring Tlaib. 22 Democrats voted for the censure. So I did my little math there. And if you take 22 votes away, 4 Republicans, by the way, voted against it. If you take my little math, if you do your little math, you see that of the 234 who voted for the censure, 212 were Republican. The House requires 218 votes to pass anything. If you had 220 people on the floor, of those 220, 218 would have to vote in favor of a bill for it to pass. The fact that if you're not on that floor of the House, if you don't vote for a bill, your vote counts. You count against it. There's none of this like only people voting majority. You have to have more than half of all reps to pass anything. So if the Democrats had stuck together and voted against censuring one of their own, then there'd be no censure resolution. Now, I don't want Democrats to stick together a lot of the times. A lot of the time, I want them, especially the progressive wing, to go right after the warmongers and the profiteers and the for-profit healthcare flacks. Of course. But if you're going to censure one of your most progressive members, that's wrong. And why does it happen? See, I don't understand this. Every single Democrat united. This is a big talking point, a big selling point for the Democrats, right? Is, hey, we've got our stuff together. We're not like the Republicans who can't even elect a leader, can't even elect a House Speaker. We're all in it together. We all voted for Hakeem Jeffries. He's responsible. He's efficient. He's organized. That's why Democrats, this is what you heard from, say, Jamie Raskin, who, by the way, to his credit, voted against the censure resolution, spoke in favor of Tlaib. And he's pretty strong supporter of Israel, but he gets credit from, in my book, for at least doing the right thing here. So why? That's what I don't understand. I thought Democrats are the party that's unified. They're not all stabbing each other in the back and, grandstanding the way the Freedom Caucus does. Well, in this case, 22 Democrats voted for censuring Tlaib. And I get it. They live in, pro-Israel districts, or they live in swing districts where they might get attacked by evangelicals who are all in for Israel. Why didn't Hakeem Jeffries, the unanimous choice of the Democratic caucus, why didn't he keep them together? He could have gone to those 22 Democrats and said, we're not giving the Republicans one thing. They don't get to censure Rashida. It doesn't happen. I understand, you want to vote this way or that way, but we are going to be united in support of our House member. We believe in freedom of speech. We're not going to censure her. If he had done that, those Democrats wouldn't have voted for the censure. Or if they had, they would have paid a steep cost. He could have threatened them with losing assignments. He could have threatened them with, some sort of public denunciation, the way some Democrats go after, say, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. There were ways for the Democrats to protect Rashida Tlaib, and they didn't do it. So my question to the progressives, my question to AOC and to Tlaib, who voted for him, who voted for Jeffries, to Summer Lee, to Jamal Bowman, to Ayanna Pressley, to Jayapal, my question to all of you is, why would you ever consider voting for Hakeem Jeffries, the guy whose two primary backers for years and years and years have been Wall Street and AIPAC, and the Israeli lobby? I mean, this is the chickens coming home to roost, isn't it? Isn't it? Of course it is. They're getting exactly. And why did they vote for Jeffries in the first place? Why do they all join together? Because they can't take the criticism. They can't take getting locked out or shut out by House leadership the way Pelosi threatened to do to them back in 2001 when they pretty much all voted for her to be House Speaker, and they didn't do force the vote. Well, guess what? It got you nothing. It got you bupkis. It got your Michigan Congresswoman censured. And it could very well come back to haunt you in the election next year. All right, I'll be back Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks for being part of the Free for All.